Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to our final Genealogy Researching Your Family Tree Google Hangout, coming to you live from the University of Strathclyde in Glasgow. Today we are putting your questions to Tahisha McCabe and Graham Holton. Please feel free to ask any questions using the Google Hangout question bar. Alternatively, you can send questions using Twitter. Be sure to use the hashtag FLGenealogy. And now, without further ado, I'm going to hand over to your hosts for the Hangout, Tahisha McCabe and Graham Holton.
Hey there, thanks for joining us. Before we start on questions, and a lot of questions have come in, so that's what we're going to prioritize on today's Google Hangout. I just want to say thank you to everybody who's taken part in the course. It's been a really wonderful course run this time, with lots of people putting in some really excellent feedback and support for one another on the discussion forum. So I'm really thankful that you all have been so active and supportive of one another. It's been a great experience for me as an educator to go along on the journey with you all. And I just want to say hello to you all from Chris, who knew that we were taking part today in the Hangout, and she's sorry that she can't be here, but she wanted to say thank you to everybody who's appreciated her story. And just to assure you all that she's continuing her research journey, as you will have seen in the first Hangout when she was here with me. So, right, so as I said, we've got a lot of questions coming in. So what we're going to do is prioritize those. And as you can see, Graham is here with me, bringing along his wonderful DNA expertise, as well as lots of other expertise too. So without further ado, I'm going to pass over to him so he can get started with DNA stuff, and then we'll wrap back to more general questions after that. So, Graham.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Right, we have a number of interesting questions in on genetic genealogy. So I'm going to start off with one from Mo Leggett, basically questioning what is the point of DNA testing? Why would you do DNA testing? And the second point she makes, sub-point, is does this really depend on the number of people, the results depend on the number of people actually in the databases for comparison? So firstly, the point of DNA testing, there are quite a number of questions which can be answered through DNA testing, which it may be impossible to answer in any other way. For example, it's possible to make connections between documented and undocumented family lines. So these can be relatively recent in time and even going back as far as sometimes 600-700 years. And if you do get the opportunity to link up with somebody who has a documented line as a result of a close match, a close DNA match, you may be able to make contact with them and may give you the vital clue to take your own documented line even further back. Second major point, purpose of DNA testing can be to overcome issues of illegitimacy. And this can relate to long ago, but can relate to very recent times as well. And there are a number of examples coming through now of living individuals who don't know who their actual biological father was. And through DNA testing, it has been possible actually to identify who the father was, and in fact to meet up with living relatives of that line. So that's really quite exciting for people that are involved in that and want to know the truth of things. And final point I wanted to make on purposes of testing, DNA testing, it's possible to corroborate oral tradition, particularly relating to clans and families. So you may have a tradition in your family that you are descended from one of the Scottish clans or one of the well-known families, and it can now be possible to do testing and establish that that is the case, and sometimes even to establish which particular branch, if it's one of the large Scottish clans, for example, with a number of sort of branches, it can now be possible to discover which branch you descend from. So I think that covers a few important reasons why it is worth doing DNA testing. The other issue of the numbers of people that have tested on the databases, this is quite important. The more test results that are available on a particular database for comparison, the better. And of course, this is a good reason why it might be worthwhile testing with more than one company. Okay, so let me move on now to a question from Janet Pogson. She's wondering about the ownership of DNA test results and how far can the information be shared with others. Well, in fact, the results are owned by the person who actually gives the sample, and there are varying levels of security on these, but basically this person has control of the results and how they're dealt with. So very little information is revealed without the owner's permission. If you come up with matches on the database, there'll be a very limited amount of information that will also be available to those matches, but it is very limited. Okay, now moving on now to a question from Anne Ball. She was wondering about consideration of testing companies, basically. How important is that? It is a very good idea to consider very carefully basically what you hope to gain from testing and which company might best suit your particular needs. And again, as I've already mentioned, you may find that it is a good idea to test, in fact, with more than one company, because one of your needs may be to get matches, and obviously the more matches you can get is going to be increased by the number of companies you might test with. In fact, one of the examples of an individual who did not know his biological father and now does know the answer to that question, that was only established by testing with a second company and finding a close match there, which gave the clues towards the answer to his question. Now, several interesting questions relating to autosomal DNA coming up next. We have a question from Patricia Snowden and another one from Melanie Hume. Basically, they have the issue that they don't have any other male relatives in the family to test, and wondering if they can find out something about their male line, or their father's DNA by doing autosomal testing or DNA testing of some sort. The only way to go about this really is to do autosomal testing, and well, of course, there is the other approach, which might be just to do further research in documentary sources, trace further back and see if you can track down another line, a collateral line to present day male relations. But the other way is through autosomal DNA testing, and of course autosomal DNA testing can be done by females. So the procedure with that would be, you would have to hope that you would get a match with a male on the surname, the particular surname you want to trace. And then it would be a question of trying to make contact with that person or persons from that surname, and then, transfer information relating to the documentation and see if you can follow that up, see if you can actually establish and verify the relationship through documentary sources. And that provides a possible way of finding out information about the Y chromosome results for the particular surname that you're tracing. Not a particularly easy task, but with perseverance that could work out. Right, and then one final question meantime. This is from Barbara Rod, who has a story in her family that she has Persian ancestry, and wondering, is that possible to establish through DNA testing? And again, the best test for this purpose is the autosomal DNA test. Now, this test includes information that's is being differently described. Sometimes it's called ethnic analysis, sometimes biogeographical analysis, or maybe admixture analysis. And basically it gives a percentage breakdown by generally fairly large geographical areas of what your genetic makeup is. At the present state of development of this part of the autosomal DNA testing, it doesn't tend to be particularly useful at present. But there are some more specific instances where it may be more valuable. For example, if you have an ancestor, a fairly recent ancestor within the last few generations, who may have been African or Asian or perhaps Jewish, that should show up in the autosomal DNA results. But to say much more than that is not really possible at this stage. Now, this type of test, or this aspect of this type of test, will be upgraded by the various companies as time goes on, and it will improve. But you shouldn't really take too much out of this at present, apart from the specific cases I've just mentioned of African, Asian, or Jewish. Okay, so I think that takes care of our first batch of questions. Okay, now I'll pass over to Tahisha.
Yeah, that's great. I'm just curious, Graham, about that last point you made about the sort of non-validity of the areas. Do you think that's because just enough people haven't tested yet, so they don't have the raw data, or is it down to the quality of the test?
It's down to really, these things are all done from reference sets of data. So I think one of the issues is the tendency, the bias of testing is towards North American testers at the moment. So that's one issue. If there were more test results from the actual areas of various parts of Europe, Asia, and so on, which are a bit lacking at the moment, that would help to refine the results a bit further. So that's really the issue at the moment. I could perhaps mention that it does seem to be generally recognised that the 23andMe test is a bit more reliable than, say, Ancestry or Family Tree DNA in that particular aspect of the test, the admixture by geographical.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Well, that's interesting. Yeah, I just got my autosomal results back not too long ago, and didn't actually give me anything terribly unknown. Yes, I'm British and Northern European and a little bit Southern European for everything that actually tells me. But yeah, I was quite keen to find out. It'd be great if I got some Jewish thrown in there or something something besides just plain vanilla. Oh, well. But yes, anyway. So, okay. So we've got lots of other things coming in. I'm just looking at the list of things that good things are coming in on. So, but before we go to those, I just wanted to answer a couple of questions that came in on the course information. So Roger Nash had a series of interesting questions, which a couple of you have actually gone in and answered, I think, quite well, but I just wanted to put my 2 cents worth in. So he's asked, number one, what's the best free genealogy site and why? And really, I would say probably best, but I would say Family Search, and really due to its worldwide coverage. Now, that's not to denigrate other free sites like FreeBMD, FreeSem, and the many other ones out there, but Family Search is pretty exceptional in that it has such a wide range of sources available from across the world, so it's pretty darn powerful. He's also curious about what we think is the best subscription website and why. This, as other folks have said, really depends on the area of research and area of world that you're interested in researching. But personally, for me, for my research and my professional research, I can't do without Ancestry because it covers so many different areas of the world: US, England, Australia, and Canada, etc. although I do have subscriptions to lots of other websites because Ancestry doesn't cover everything. Although I would say that if your local library has a subscription to Ancestry, and a lot of them do, you might want to subscribe to another database, so save your pennies for that. And for me, again, personally, that one would be Find My Past, and that's, again, down to where in the world my research takes me. They have some really good newspaper information, and they're getting increasing development in the States. So yeah, and then he's also curious about the best family tree software and why that might be. And again, I think somebody used the word, the phrase, how long is a piece of string? And I think that's quite apt. It really depends on what you need the software to do. I don't personally have deep experience with more than 2 programs, so it's hard for me to say what the best one is. The one that I use the most is Family Tree Maker, but I also have used Legacy in the past with beginner classes, and I think it's a good sturdy program. But other people feel differently. Graham, do you have any thoughts about any of those areas?
Right, well, of course, there's also an issue of whether you're using a PC.
Yes,
or a
PC
Mac,
or a
isn't
Mac,
it?
absolutely, yeah.
So that's the first issue to look at, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Family Tree Maker seems to be the most widely used program, but I know other people have favourites.
Yeah.
Okay.
Totally.
Yeah, on subscription sites, yeah, I mean, obviously there's the big ones, but as Tahisha mentioned, I mean, an awful lot of them are going to be dependent on the area you're researching.
Yeah.
So they're going to specialise particularly in that particular area. So you probably would want to use one of the sort of worldwide ones, plus then look specifically at the area you're researching as well.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, if you're doing Scottish research, you have to use Scotland's people, which I use a lot, not for my personal stuff, because so far, sadly, I've not found any Scottish links, but I certainly use it pretty much every day for my professional and teaching career. So, yeah. Right, but good questions, definitely. So Anita Arundel-Meek asked a question about the tremendous amount of research that she eventually decides doesn't have a place on her family tree, and wondering what to do with this research. Should she get rid of it? Do we have any simple yet effective suggestions about this? And Bernard Huntington had I think a great suggestion off of the forums, and he was suggesting that you detach and archive this type of information and put down why you decided it didn't fit into your family tree, but then hold on to it in a separate, maybe a separate tree, or if you have downloaded files, written files, you could create a separate file folder, whether that be digital or reality, physical, and just keep it in a separate section. Yes, the word term pack rat does come up a bit. I kind of hesitate to hit the delete key because, as somebody else said, you go back and you realize that you've deleted something that actually you need. So, we tend to hold on to things personally. Bernard also had a good idea, perhaps creating a paper copy and giving it to the local archive. You could also look at perhaps giving some information to a local family history society in the area for where the people that you're hiving off came from. They might be interested in that. So, it's a good question. And indeed, all of us come up with people that aren't actually part of our family, but we've ended up doing a lot of research on nonetheless. It's a shame to let all that go. So, right. So looking at we've got some questions coming in off of Twitter. Jane was curious about how easy or hard was it to carve a career as a genealogist? I think it can be quite challenging to carve out a career as a genealogist. Like most things where you're a self-employed person, you need to create a name for yourself. do advertising and just start making links with people. Joining professional groups is a good way to do that. It's good to reach out to other genealogists, get involved with networking, because what I've found is a lot of work comes from other genealogists. They're either too busy to do a piece of work that's come in, or something's come in that they just don't have expertise on, like DNA stuff. I know about DNA, but I don't consider myself an expert in any way, so I pass that on. So that's a very good thing. But yeah, it's, I suppose, like most things, the more you put into it, the easier it becomes. But it's in no means easy. It's like developing any business that you're running yourself. It can be quite challenging. So, any thoughts about that, Graham?
Yeah, I mean, it tends to be, I think most professional genealogists are part-time. They're not regarding it as a full-time job, and many of them have maybe had previous careers and they've moved into this part-time career. That's not to say that there aren't also younger professional genealogists, because there certainly are, but I don't think we should look at it in most cases as being a possibility for a full-time employment, really.
Or you're not just doing professional research, you're adding on and being a writer, an educator, is going out and speaking. So you can add things on to just being a research only genealogist. And the good thing is there are a lot of ways to build in lots of opportunities for getting work. So different types of work. Let's see. So Carol Sturgis, again off of Twitter, had a question about, heraldry. And she's noticed that part of the title for our postgraduate course is Heraldic Studies, which we indeed do cover on the course. And there are lots of books out there about heraldry. And she was curious in particular about whether there's likely to be a future learn course on the subject. Maybe at this point, not from ourselves, although it's a good idea. And I certainly know a couple of people who might be interested in putting that together. So we'll note down the interest and see where we get with it. So yeah, it's a good idea. Thanks. Okay, let's see. Sorry, I'm just looking down whilst I'm looking at the questions here. Okay, I'm seeing a lot of questions are coming in with people having questions about doing research in Ireland. Irish research can be quite challenging. The good thing is there are a lot of Irish records that are being digitized and added onto various databases because of the troubles, various types of troubles from the government pulping census records and so on down the line. A number of records just aren't available that we would find available in other areas of the world. So there are just basic challenges with Irish research. I did cover some of the ideas of websites, good places to go for covering Ireland in the Ask Takesha answers that I gave. So if you go back to step 4.3 on the MOOC, on the course, there's a link to the answers there, and one of them I do give a number of websites that might be available to you. Civil registration in Ireland for births, just one person was asking about, Sue Hoyle was asking about finding birth records in Ireland around about 1879, and civil birth registration started in Ireland in 1864. So and those records are available for purchase. So I would say go on and have a look at those links. And see if some of them might be able to help you out. So, and again, lots of people asking for thoughts on new directions for research in Ireland. I would say, go and have a look at some of the links that we've suggested. There are lots of experts out there on Irish research. So hopefully you'll be able to find some information there that would help. Let's see. It's quite interesting, yeah.
Right, Carl Sturgis is asking, Why is DNA testing only for family history and specifically not for any medical purpose? Right. Well, of course, there are companies that do test for medical purposes, and 23andMe do tend to produce medical results. The reason why some of the companies suppress these is because they're specifically there to test for genealogy, and there are a lot of other ethical issues and so on with medical results, so they do tend to suppress those. But look around, look at the various companies' websites and see what they test for, what results they'll give, and you will find it is possible to do that. Yeah, but privacy is the major issue with that, really. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Need to take that one at all.
Yeah, actually, I think that would probably be a good one to answer.
Jill Chesney Green on DNA. Right, females, which test should you go for? Well, basically, just to recap on the types of tests, Y-DNA test is males only, autosomal DNA, females or males, and mitochondrial DNA, females or males. So the best test probably from a genealogical point of view for females to take is the autosomal test. The mitochondrial is mainly useful for very early origins and through genealogy, basically. But the ATDNA does look at closer connections, particularly back 5 or 6 generations. So that would be the best test to go for. Jill also says she has a male first cousin, so presumably shares my father's DNA. Yes, he would carry the Y-DNA of his father, and the best test there would probably be the Y-DNA test. Autosomal is also useful, but Jill, if you're going to take that yourself, probably he should do a Y-DNA. Yeah, but it is the case, in fact, I think there's another question relating to this about, yes, Jerry Bolton, would siblings expect to have similar results? And the answer to that is no. Well, there might be some similarities, but the point is, again, we're talking about autosomal testing here. Different segments of DNA are inherited by different siblings. Okay, so there will almost certainly be a certain level of overlap, but there could be a lot of different segments that are inherited, so there could be considerable differences. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Yes, it's a complex area, but quite a useful tool for many people, I have to say. Although it's best used in conjunction with traditional paper. Well, not paper, but record-based research. So let's see. Anne Stewart Ball's curious about best research techniques for recording family members who by nature of occupation have traveled and lived around many countries, and they sometimes miss a census. Ooh, best research methods. Yeah, sometimes these things can be rather hit and miss. If somebody's vanished in one census and you don't know where else they've gone, where do you start looking? Do you look in Scotland, in the Scotland census? If somebody's coming from England, have they perhaps gone to Australia? And that kind of thing. It can be quite difficult to pinpoint people.
Particularly, I'm just thinking a lot of countries don't have useful census records surviving that are useful for genealogists. Australia don't, Canada and USA do, but not very many other countries, really.
Yeah. I suppose as far as methods go, I would just say start being methodical about where you're looking for people, and so say you've got a family who have vanished from a census, and you suspect that they've moved to another place. Just start, like everything we were talking about, being methodical and recording where you've looked, and if you've not found somebody, then put that down. I don't think there's any magic gold bullet here, unfortunately. It's just a case of continuing to try things. I mean, the nice thing about larger data sets and in databases now is that, particularly if you have a less usual name, is that you can search across different places of countries, in different countries at the same time, and some databases do allow you to put in things like occupation against the name as well. So sometimes you can use that to pinpoint in. But I would say just be methodical and try putting in different information like occupation and just keeping a track. Sorry, I suppose we don't really have any easy way of going about it, but that's what I would do. And I would keep my fingers firmly crossed. Yeah. Let's see. Let's try refreshing if there's anything else. Graham, do you want to try answering?
Yeah, Graham March. Is it possible to check DNA when you do not have known relatives? Okay. Well, yes. Take a test and try and find matches. It's a simple answer to that. Because if you do find a close match on the company database that you test with, or companies' databases that you test with, you may discover a relatively close relative who you can then contact and try and start to fill out a documentary evidence from there. So it is possible. Again, there is an issue of how many people have tested, from what areas they've tested, whether it's going to be of much use to you. And as I mentioned earlier, the bias tends to be, there's a lot of North Americans have tested, not quite so many from other parts of the world, but the numbers are increasing all the time. And of course, with immigration and so on, it could well be that even though you may be located in the United Kingdom, you may have fairly close relatives that you didn't know about who emigrated to other parts of the world in any case. So the bias of North American testing might not be an issue there. It might actually be quite helpful. So yes, it is possible.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. Thanks, Graham, for that. Let's see. More DNA questions coming in. We're just going to take a second and have a glance at this. Sounds like that. You really should get the Y-DNA for that one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's somebody asking here, saying that they'd asked one of their two uncles, who were the last living males on each side of the family, to do a DNA test, and got the autosomal test done, and asking if that's sufficient, or should they have gone for a Y-DNA test. I would say definitely the Y-DNA test would be worth doing, particularly if the last males of a particular line, because is going to be an issue in time to come if there's no male lines existing. So it's very useful to do that. Yeah,
definitely. I mean, that's on my mother's side. We don't have any male surviving males. So we're looking at autosomal, and I would say yes, if you have a surviving male, get Y-DNA done on them as soon as possible. If they're amenable to it, of course. Of course. Hold someone down. No, don't do that. Let's see. Here. Actually,
Covered.
yeah. Oh yes, we've actually, yeah. I'll just touch on it. Andrew Ludlow was curious about rights in the United Kingdom, similar to the Freedom of Information Act. I suspect he's referring to the US one there, but there is a Freedom of Information Act in the UK, and actually I think a number of folks answered the question beautifully on the course forum, so I would refer people back to those answers. But yeah, it was in relation to signatures on registers and trying to get a copy of the register, the certificate that actually has the person's signature involved. But yeah, so yes, there is freedom of information in the UK. But yeah, I think actually the thought was you could get around it without going for the freedom of information road. So, right, actually, I think
I should attempt to do that.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
Just another one here on DNA testing. McZink, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, 2 female cousins and a male cousin, and they all did autosomal tests, and the 2 girls matched, but the male didn't, and they're wondering what that actually means. Now, the detail of that is 1 girl was a second cousin, once removed, the other was a third cousin, and the boy's a 4th cousin once removed, and they're wondering if he's perhaps too distant to match, or is it a case of infidelity or adoption? Probably the most likely reason is that he is too distant to match. Particularly once you get beyond 4th cousins, and this is slightly beyond because 4th cousin once removed, the probability of matching reduces drastically. So there's a fairly small possibility that there's going to be much of a match at that distance. Now, that's a generalization. There can be matches to more distant relations than that, but it is the most likely answer to that particular question. Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, we're coming down to the end of our time, and actually I think we've done pretty well with answering a lot of the questions. So, well so really I just wanted to say thank you again for taking part in the course, and also for coming on and being part of the Google Hangout. A question was asked on one of the forums about when we're looking at doing the course again, and I would say probably it's going to be into the new year, given that we've got our courses starting in, well, some of them in less than a month, and the autumn term is really quite busy for us. So, but if people are interested in taking the next run of the course, tell your friends and relations and family, anybody who wants to take it, to go on to the informational page for genealogy, researching your family tree, and register your interest in the next run of the course. And if you do that, it will spur us on to do the course, and also you'll get an email when the course date is set. So it's a good way to go about getting information about when the course will run again. So yes, that's really it from us. Thank you all for taking part. It's been a pleasure. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you to Hisha and Graham. And thank you to all those who participated in the Google Hangout today by watching and sending your questions. We have now reached the end of the course. We hope you've enjoyed it as much as we have enjoyed creating it for you. From all of us here in Glasgow, thank you and goodbye.